Here's an interesting question that relates to a very controversial issue among Christians. I'll read the question to you, and I want to let you know in advance that I'm not going to weigh in on the issue proper here, but I don't need to in order to answer the challenge that's being offered, because I think there's a mistake in reasoning here that I want you to see. So what this means is I'm not going to tell you how to think about this larger issue, but I am going to suggest that this way of thinking about arriving at whatever conclusion that you arrive on is not very helpful. So this is an example of not telling you what to think, but hopefully teaching you how to think. The question is about the flood, Noah's flood, and it trades on the notion or the question of whether this was a global flood or a local flood. I actually don't like that terminology because I think it's misleading. So let me repair the terminology here, because it's meant to be more fair to one side of this view. It's either a global flood or a worldwide flood. And here, of course, world doesn't mean global. It means the world that is in view, given the kind of judgment the flood was meant to accomplish. All right? Peter puts it this way: the world that then was. So if it's the case, for example, that only a small portion of the globe was inhabited by human beings, then the judgment of the flood would be restricted to that portion of the globe in which human beings were inhabitants. And there would be no, it seems, reason to go beyond that. But that portion that was inhabited by human beings that were being judged by God, which would be all the human beings, save the 8 who survived the flood, that would be referred to as the world that then was. And you keep in mind, when we use the word world, we don't mean the word globe. We could talk about the movie world. We could talk about the academic world. We could talk about the world that is the place where human beings inhabit. It's an entirely legitimate way of using the term. So the two views then would be whether the flood was global, it encompassed the entire globe, or whether it encompassed only the world that then was, meaning the inhabited world. Since the judgment was on human beings, then the flood would be limited to the portion of the globe that human beings inhabited. And on this view, of course, they would all be together in the same area. Now, the area could be very large, but it wouldn't be the entire globe on this view. So we're just distinguishing these views here. Now to the question. Isn't it obvious from scientific data that there was no global flood? And if the flood was local, and here I'm using the term worldwide, why save animals like birds, since they could easily fly away? Either way, it seems there was no real Noah's Ark. Now, there's a couple of things, there's a couple of problems with the way this challenge is put forth. First, isn't it obvious from the scientific data that there was no global flood? Well, I don't know that it's obvious at all. I haven't trafficked deeply in this issue, but arguably there are features on the planet in different parts of the world that seem to suggest large-scale destruction by water, large-scale flood, massive fossil graveyards, for example, that seem to be established when massive numbers of animals were jumbled together at once and buried very quickly. This is suggestive of a flood, a rapid flood. There may be other explanations for that. I'm just speaking to the challenge that it's obvious from the scientific data there was no global flood. Pardon me. There may be different problems with the idea. I'm just simply saying to say that it's obvious there's no scientific data for it, I think is way overstating the case. So I can't just take that as a given. First problem. Second problem, if the flood was local, why save animals like birds since they could easily fly away? Well, keep in mind when I say worldwide, that would be the local as opposed to the global. It doesn't mean that there is just a puddle, a big puddle in a valley somewhere. You want to avoid the puddle, then you just fly over there to the next ridge and you're okay. A local flood doesn't mean that it was in one zip code. It means that the entire inhabited world at that time was underwater, so much that in the region that we're talking about, the entire mountain ranges were covered. So this is a vast area, no matter how you characterize it. Now, I don't know where that was or how that was or whatever. Seems to be in the Middle East or something, and this is what destroyed the Garden of Eden. I don't know. There's a lot of speculation, but whatever it is, it wasn't small enough for the birds just to wing their way over somewhere else. And if this vast region is destroyed of its human habitation, this same vast region would be destroyed with regards to its animal habitation. And therefore, when the waters recede, we have this massive area that is completely destroyed. And 8 people now have to repopulate that. So it makes entire sense that all of the representative animals of that area, of that world, if you will, male and female, be brought into protective custody, so to speak, so that when the flood was over for that massive area, humans would be able to repopulate and animals would be able to repopulate as well. Therefore, it seems to me the conclusion that the questioner comes to, that either way, it seems like there was no real Noah's Ark, doesn't follow at all. It doesn't follow from anything that has been brought up in this particular question. It could very easily have been a Noah's Ark in a global flood, and if not a global flood, a flood that encompassed the world that then was. And so the account is intact. I don't see any reason why not take it at face value.